My guest today is Paola Knecht, who is a certified leadership, transformational, and self-development coach who is dedicated to helping people transform their professional and personal lives. She is also the founder of My Mindpower Coaching and Consulting. In today's episode, Paola and I talk about her latest book, The Success Mindset, Take Back the Leadership of Your Mind. This book teaches you 11 pillars to untap the higher self that lives within you and which longs to have an extraordinary life, the life you're born to live. Welcome to LIFEOLOGY.
Thank you, James. A pleasure to be here.
It is such an honor. For where are you calling in today?
From Zurich, Switzerland. Yeah.
That is one thing I love. I get to meet so many amazing people like yourself all over the world. And it feels so international. Like I feel like I'm over there right now, even though I'm here in Miami, Florida. But it's like I said, it's a great honor to meet you in person today.
It's an honor for me too. And yes, it's great that we can meet even if we're so far away, right?
Yes, that is one of the great things. Now, how did you get into the space of transformation, of helping people? How were you when you were a younger person? How was that for you in your life? And how did that make sense for you that you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do?
You know, I knew since I was a little girl that I was meant to help people.
Mm-hmm.
I always found myself giving advice, even if was unrequested. It just felt so natural to me to have, conversations with friends, and I was naturally giving advice. And I read self-help books since I'm 13.
Wow.
So it's a topic that it's very close to my heart. I know basically all the self-help help authors out there.
Mm-hmm. So it's natural for you to transition into that for yourself to do, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes, even though I studied engineer, so I come as an engineer from profession, and I did the international management. I joined very big companies doing business-like roles. However, this self-development, mental health, these topics were always close to my heart. So they were always with me and helped me in my roles.
Did you somehow figure out how to merge the engineering parts and the self-help world? Was there a way that you were able to connect those together? Just curious. It doesn't matter if you have to.
In the beginning, yes, in the beginning, I did not see the link so quickly. But when I joined the business world is where it started to click. Because I realized the mechanical or logical way of thinking and solving problems in corporations were not always so efficient. So when you add the human element, it's where I started to really realize that, being an engineer doesn't stop you from, developing soft skills, trying to understand human nature. And we also have some rules, like human nature also is sometimes driven by basic rules that we don't see. Yeah. And I was able to relate that later in life. But
and that's really
not
cool.
So far off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really cool. Like for me as well, I did the same thing from being a psychotherapist and then transitioning into media. That's something I'd done my whole life when I was younger. So I was able to find the intersects just the way you were as well, which is really cool when it happens. So I really enjoy that. Now, for your book, what happens when you're like, oh my goodness, I need to write this book? So for my listeners tuning in right now, the name of the book is called The Success Mindset, Take Back the Leadership of Your Mind by Paola Knecht. What happened for you that says, I need to write this book right now?
I always wanted to be a writer, and I used to write blogs since some years already. But what made me really what really started to blink on me like, it's time to write a book, is when this pandemic started and I could not coach people live like before. So being in kind of isolation was the time when here in Switzerland they locked out everything, so you could not meet people. I was at home and I just had my first baby, Henry. He was just born, and so I was thinking, I'm out. I'm feel quite isolated, and I want to reach out people. How can I do that? And then I started to sketch the book. Like, if I could write now a book, what will I talk about? And then I started to sketch it.
Wow.
And then it came to life. I did not imagine I would publish it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
This all came later, but it started in March 2020 when I started to sketch it and started to take life, let's say.
That's great. That's amazing. That is really, I think a lot of people during the pandemic, when it happened, I think a lot of people like yourself, and it doesn't, everyone has a different way in which they deal with things, but a lot of more creative people, there was a lot of publishing, a lot of writing, a lot of new businesses that were created. And so I think it's wonderful that you were able to see this as well and say, if I can't do what I did before, how do I take it and do something slightly different? And I think that's a lesson for all of us, is when we can't do what we used to do, but we still want to be in the same field, you have to pivot and figure out a slightly different way to do it. I know many people, I have one person in mind that was a writer, but then had Parkinson's disease, but he couldn't write anymore. So what he was able to do was he was able to speak, but it was very difficult to speak, but he was still able to have it dictated. And then from there, the book was written. So it's learning how to take your skill and slowly change it in a way where you can still do what you want to do, but it may not be the same way, but it still is giving out from that which you were called or supposed to do. So it's beautiful that you're able to find that way as well.
Yes, and very rewarding because it gives me access to much more people that I cannot really see.
Sure.
And then this book gives an opportunity really to reach out to people living in the US, for example, or in Mexico or in Latin America. And this brings me a lot of satisfaction.
Yes, of course. Now, in your book, you talk about the 11 pillars that can help people. Can we talk about some of those? I don't know how much. Let's see. We currently have about 13 more minutes or 15 more minutes to do this. So can we walk through some of those 11 pillars?
Sure. So the key premise of the book is I strive to answer the question, what differentiates the extraordinary life versus an ordinary life?
Yeah.
And I aspire to give the answer with these 11 pillars, which is, they are characteristics of people or great leaders, and also people I met in the personal life, in business, and also biographies of extraordinary leaders from all paths of life. And I basically compiled how they did it, how they redefined success in a way that was really meaningful for them and could reach things that they never thought possible. And so the first pillar starts by defining a strong vision for your life. And don't be shy, but really aim very high, the highest you can get. And really imagine, okay, if I have just this life, and this is the only shot I got, what do I want this life to be then?
Yeah.
And what is the highest I can aspire? And set the bar very high. And the rest of the pillars basically help you to develop the personality trait that you need to keep consistently going towards that vision.
That's great. So
the second pillar.
Well, yeah. So for the first part, the vision, though, because so many times people have this idea, but sometimes they think, okay, this is way too big. So, for example, let's say my vision was, I want to be the president of the United States. That's a huge vision.
Yeah.
Now, is it attainable? Sure, but sometimes people, can think that's just way too big. I can't think that far out. How do you help people push beyond the limits of when they tell themselves, I can't do this, that's too much? What would you say to that to help them move beyond that and say, no, I probably could do that, or I want to do that, I will do that? What do you tell them?
My recommendation will be that instead of aiming for a position or a very specific position, let's say being the president of the United States, something that drives you even stronger or that brings you even more fire is to think, what do I want this world to become? What is a positive change I could aspire to support? For example, let's think about Nelson Mandela, which was the first Black president in apartheid South Africa. His dream was not to become the first Black president of South Africa. His dream was to contribute to eradication of the apartheid era, to reach a democratic society for everybody. And so that's basically pulled him. That vision pulled him, and and ultimately he reached positions where he could get closer and closer to getting roles where he could actually influence that to happen.
So a lot of it, if I'm hearing what you say,
then,
is it would go more towards a person's passion. So if you look towards the vision of the end result, it's not necessarily like you said, the personal role that someone would create, but it's more in the sense of how do you create movement or change either in your immediate surroundings or maybe even a global thing. So when people can look at the change and then see how that resonates with them, and from there, the other aspects of, let's say, the president of South Africa, then all of a sudden that's something that becomes the byproduct of that. So when you do all this, then that's on the other side, that's the result or the benefits of doing something that changes your world or your community around you. Is that about right?
yes, I believe that it's much more powerful that you look at a situation, a project, or just an aspiration to move positive change in society that brings you more farther and also pulls you towards reaching a position where you could eventually influence that outcome.
I really like that. And I think, even from a psychological approach, so when there's been many studies that show when people do volunteer work or that they give back, what it does is it changes that gives them more dopamine, which dopamine then gives them more focus and energy, which then allows them to want to do even more of that. And then doing that, it shows that gives them more longevity in their life. And then with more longevity or life that they're able to live, then they're able to give back even more and more. So from a psychological, neurological approach or biological approach, I hear what you're saying as well, is not only can we create the vision for that, but it also then can also transform the chemicals in our body, allows us to live longer, allows us to give back to the world around us. So I really see that symbiotic or that approach of giving back also allows you to become a healthier, stronger, more vibrant person as well.
Absolutely. Because when you link what you're doing, the activity, and your vision with what you love, if it's strongly connected, then basically all the positive energy will sustain you and going towards that journey, right?
Exactly. That's
it will
amazing.
be much easier than if you don't love it or you just want to reach a position for the power, for the money, but you inside you're not driven by something else.
Well, I think it also goes back to one's motivation. So to ask yourself, why do I want to attain this vision? What is the purpose? And so if your motivation is, I want to give back. And so there's another thing here, which is really cool. So when altruism for my listeners and viewers means doing something for someone else without wanting anything in return. And so there's a difference between if you're altruistic versus you want to look good in front of people, because the way it works is if you're altruistic with someone, your body rewards you with dopamine. So if I see you on the street, I'm like, oh, I want to help Paola, I'm going to give her money or whatever. But if I give her money, if I give you Paola money, and all of a sudden I feel really good about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just feel this euphoria. That means I was actually doing something because I didn't want anything in return. But if I gave it to you and I was like, oh, did everybody see me? Did people see what I did? Then all of a sudden my body doesn't reward me that way. So I think it's the same thing as well, as when you can find out your motivation for why you want this vision, then all of a sudden your body starts to feel that energy, and that energy then gives you more passion to be able to fulfill it. And so, but if you don't feel that when you're developing your vision, then maybe it's good to look at your motivation. So why do you want to do this? Because the more specific you are with it, the more successful you'll be to accomplish that vision, as opposed to looking for external validation in doing this, because that won't be able to last. You won't be able to sustain that.
Absolutely.
What's the second pillar?
That's right. So the second pillar is once you discover your vision, or let's say you have a good idea where do you want to head towards, then you need a supporting environment to reach your vision. And with supporting environment, I don't mean the outside world, that comes second, but the inside, your values, your behaviors and actions should be aligned with your vision. So we explore a little bit what are the key values that you consider the most important in your life, how you align those values with your behavior, and what is this leading you in terms of acting. Because you might think you're acting according to your values, but sometimes we unconsciously act against them.
Yes. So I think a lot of that is more for one's integrity as well. For example, if my values say one thing, but I'm out talking to other people and my values are not being demonstrated. So if I want to change the world with, let's say, kindness, I'm just making this up, kindness, but yet I'm out talking about other people behind their back, well, that's not very kind. And so it's the recognition of what am I consistent in all areas of my life. So another way to do that, what I always tell people is, if you were to pick 5 people in your life that were to follow you around and review everything you did, would they all say the same thing? Would they all say James is a kind person? Because if they don't, then all of a sudden, maybe my personal integrity is not as sharp or as tight or as healthy as I thought. So, it can be an interesting concept is if you think of 5 of the most influential people or 5 of the most people that really know you. Like, for example, one would be my mom. My mom would be one of them to follow, and other people as well. But if they look at me, it's like, James, what are you doing? And so that's something, I think perhaps your listeners and viewers here can think of that when you talk about lining up your values. And so to think if people were to follow me around, would it be the same? Would I be proud of what I did overall in my life?
Yes, absolutely. For example, I talk in the example of self-respect. When someone has self-respect as a core value, but then you're at work and your boss tells you, I am Paola, or hey, James, I need a report and I want it now. And if you don't do it, I kick you out. And then you just say, oh, yes, I do whatever you want. And then the boss leaves and then you're like, damn, why did I say yes? Oh no, and you think in the effort, and
I know, exactly.
but then you were not able to stand for yourself and say, sorry, no, I don't have time or I don't have the capacity to do it, and you don't show your self-respect. That's a contradiction of values, right?
That's a really good point. I think sometimes that shows up in a lot of areas of our life, which comes back to boundaries. I don't think we all, everybody, including myself at times, don't set the healthiest boundaries, because a boundary keeps us safe. We can have a physical boundary, we can have an emotional boundary, we can have a spiritual boundary, whatever that is. But if we don't learn how to set those all the time, then unfortunately people can run over us. When I used to work with kids, I used to, when I would do a little group therapy with kids, I would get like a hula hoop and they would sit inside the hula hoop and I would say, okay, everything in this hula hoop is my boundary. So this is who James is. This is what he laughs at. This is what he gets mad at. This is, where he was born. This is what his family's like. And so when I'm in my hula hoop, this is my boundary that no one can penetrate. So then the little kids, they would tell me about them. We would bump each other with our little hula hoops and say, okay, you can't come in mine. I can't come in yours. So it was a really cute way to teach boundaries. And so, but I think that's something, going back to the self-respect that you're talking about, is to be able to say, what's in your hula hoop? And how do you make sure that when someone tries to get in your hula hoop, no, you cannot, because this is why. And that goes back to the self-respect that you were talking about.
Yeah. And what we have to be careful is we don't confuse self-respect with wanting to not please people, because sometimes for trying to please people, we let our boundaries get attacked by others because we are afraid that others will think badly of us.
Yes.
But then, as you clearly say, where is my boundary? Where is my self-respect really resonating with me?
And I think the cognitive dissonance, in other words, I think the disconnect for many people is they have this big vision, but then if they're worried that when people think about them, like you said, there is a disconnect, because you can't reach that final vision or attain that vision if you worry about what people think of you. And so there's a difference between having a wise counsel, like you said in the second pillar, surrounding yourself in a supportive environment of people who can correct you as needed, versus external people that don't really matter. But if the people that, quote, don't matter, if we allow them to influence us, then once again, you can't attain your vision, because not everybody can go where you're supposed to go. And so not everybody's going to appreciate you. There's going to be a lot of jealousy in the world. A lot of people just won't support you. So learning how to differentiate or to distinguish between who are the healthy people in my circle, and then who are the people externally that I, at the end of the day, just don't have that much power over me, or I give them too much power. And if I do, that's a direct conflict of me accomplishing my vision, because that's energy that you're redirecting to people that at the end of the day just don't matter.
Yes. That's also part of setting the boundaries, and also having a good understanding and awareness of who is the people that is supporting me going towards my vision. And sometimes it's disappointing to see that maybe family or friends that you think are very close to you and love you go against that wish, or do not agree that you, for example, become a musician instead of a doctor. But there you have to stand strong with, okay, what is more important for me, to follow what my parents tell me or my friends tell me is best for me, or what is really best for me from the inside, to follow my intuition.
Yeah.
And whatever you choose will come back to you.
Yes, it will. For better or worse, that always happens. Trust me, I know that. I know that very well. We won't have time to go through the rest of the pillars, but what was the main thing that you found the difference between an extraordinary life and an ordinary life? What was the difference?
The extraordinary life is when their vision pulls them. They are driven by a bigger meaning than just a personal meaning, just to reach a personal goal. It normally goes much beyond. For example, they wish to do a positive change in society. They wish to reach or to make the world a better place. And the cause is much bigger than maybe their area of influence, but they get pulled by it. Versus an ordinary life, you define our goals that are maybe just concerning yourself. Like, okay, I want now a bigger house. Maybe now I have a 2-store house, now I want a 4-store house, and now I have a Chevrolet, and now I want a Ferrari. And okay, it's a personal goal, but goes not beyond. There is nothing more special, Or people that decide to have it comfortable and say, okay, I'm happy with my job. I am happy with watching TV every evening and having a comfy life.
Yeah.
And then at one point they get in overconsumption or they depend on other means to get this passion or that missing energy.
Which can be a form of like a midlife crisis of some sort. Sure.
Exactly. And what happens then? You go into overconsumption, you buy more things than you need, you drink too much, or you smoke too much, or, you go into all sorts of addictions. And that's where you need to ask yourself, okay, why do I fall into these addictions? What's missing?
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And I think you've shed so many light on different things. And I know when my listeners purchase this book, that they're going to be really inspired as well, because I think I really like that first aspect of the vision, because without a vision, people will perish. They just don't look for anything. They just exist. And that's not really living. And so for the people listening right now who say, well, I'm okay with having that, I'm just looking, I want a bigger house or a bigger car. That's totally fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But this is for those individuals who feel like they want something more. I always tell people is, if you have the thought, there's got to be something more to life, or I can't imagine doing the same thing over and over again. If that's any of my viewers or listeners right now who are thinking this, that is a form of mediocrity. It doesn't mean that you're mediocre. It just means that you've caught in a rut and you're like, gosh, I just don't want to do this anymore. So I know Paula's book here is really going to inspire you, to help you find your vision, help you go through all the 11 pillars, and to help you accomplish the life that you've always wanted to live. So Paola Knecht, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on my show today. Thank you so much. If my listeners do want to purchase this book, and I highly recommend it, The Success Mindset, Take Back the Leadership of Your Mind, where will they find all this information online?
Sure. Thank you so much, James. So you can visit Amazon, and it's available in Kindle version and paperback. And you also can go to my social media if you want to interact with me or wish to know more. Everywhere, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with my name, Paola Knecht, or you can visit my website, which is www.my/mindpower.com.
Excellent. Well, my listeners also know that if you cannot find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmiller@lifeology.com, and I will link you with Paola Knecht. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on my show today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, James. It was a pleasure.